Hi there. Today's Loving Bravely vlog is about why you should never fight with your intimate partner screen to screen. Fight screen to screen like this. So I will say, and most therapists you talk to will say, that rarely, if ever, a week goes by that a therapy client of mine doesn't pull out their phone in order to read to me a back and forth via text that they had with their romantic partner, or a friend, or a parent, or a sibling, or a kid. So much of the business of our relationships these days, romantic and otherwise, is ends up being conducted screen to screen instead of face to face. I was thinking the other day that even the definition of the word "said," like I said, we are morphing the definition of the word "said" into something that involves our mouths. I said. And it's becoming increasingly, I said it, right? Or I tweeted it, or I posted it. We will use that word, I said it. And I just think it's worth noting that saying something verbally, face to face, voice to voice, is quite different than saying it. So here's why, as a couples therapist, it is my suggestion that you not fight screen to screen. We know that the vast majority of communication is nonverbal, right? So the words that we say are a piece, certainly, of what we're communicating, but it's just a piece. Within those words or around those words is the entire context of our face, of our body position, of our tone, that the receiver, right? When we're talking, we're the sender. The receiver of our words takes our words and puts it in the context of our facial expression, our body position, our tone, in order to then make meaning from it. When we do it like this, there's no meaning, there's no context, right? The words of the text are stripped of the context around which those words are occurring. And I would argue that even if you're using emojis, and even if you're using some of these new features that kind of affect the way the message comes in on the phone, right? It comes in sort of largely and booms in on your phone. Even if you're using those features, it's very, very different still from what mammal to mammal, sender and receiver, understand in terms of communication. And when you're having a fight, emotions are running high. In a fight, in a conflict, there's always a risk that our partner is going to hear us more negatively than we intend. When, by definition, in conflict, there's sort of a negative vibe around the relationship at that moment, and screen to screen, I think, can really amplify that. So that's a reason to get into the same space. We know that couples who are in a healthy relationship, research by Dr. John Gottman out in Washington, has shown that couples in a healthy relationship, if you track how they do conflict, what you see are lots of little white flags, and sometimes they're verbal and sometimes they're nonverbal. So when we fight face to face, there may be a way that I reach out and sort of touch your foot, and that's a way that you know that I'm reaching for connection, that I want to kind of turn the corner on this conflict. There may be other kinds of ways that partners signal to each other, let's not take this to that next step. Let's make sure we kind of rein it in or dial it down. And it's very hard to send and receive those all important little white flags, those repair attempts, when we're having a conflict screen to screen. So what people sometimes say, by way of sort of pushing back on this idea, is don't you think that if emotions are running high and we may say things that we're going to regret later, isn't it better in that situation to just get our phones out and do it that way? Because then maybe it's more contained. It can't get as loud and as out of control if it's screen to screen. So I think sometimes there's a notion that it can limit the damage. So if that is something that you are aware of and mindful of and wanting to do, I would invite you to consider another form of asynchronous communication. So, so when we go back and forth on a text, right, we're not in the same space at the same time talking. There's an asynchronicity there. So instead of going screen to screen via text, what if, as an effort to kind of contain a fight, bring it down, keep emotions from running too high, minimize the damage, what if you do an old-fashioned letter writing situation? And maybe email to email. But there's something about putting it in an email or putting it in a letter that is, the intention is, let me get my whole thought out. Let me get it kind of all in one place at one time, package it, and then give it to you. That's quite different than what we're trying to do with a text, which has a more synchronous situation, right? It's more back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So by way of slowing down, minimizing damage, I invite you to challenge yourself if you want to try and find a different channel on which to communicate, to go for a letter or an email. Interestingly, the other thing that happens if you decide to take the time and the space to put your thoughts down in an email is it may shift your positionality vis-a-vis that conflict. I think whenever we write, we see things, we hear things, we feel things that are different than when we're kind of in the heat of the moment. So I think that stepping away and putting your thoughts to paper or to screen in the form of an email can be a way of really nurturing and tending to the relationship. What you're saying then to your partner is, I love you too much, I love us too much to continue this decontextualized way of communicating. So let me step away, get some thoughts together, and come back to you. So there, rather than it's not withdrawal, it's a pause and a chance to kind of reorganize yourself and come back, hopefully with something that's a little more thought out and full-bodied than what's happening when two phones are going back to back in that way. So something for you to consider. We know that conflict in a long-term romantic relationship is 100% inevitable. We're different people, and there are so many factors that shape connection, and inevitably conflict's going to occur. So really the question is, how are you and your partner going to navigate that conflict? And I invite you to challenge yourself and challenge your partner and challenge your love relationship to kind of elevate your game and manage those differences, kind of manage those moments of friction and tension in a way that is more mindful, more conscious, more tending to the relationship than going back and forth screen to screen for all the reasons we just talked about. So there you have it. Take care. Thanks for listening.